Emma Thompson always knew when her stepfather, Dale, was nearing their rural Montana home. The distinct rumble of his truck engine was a sound that sent shivers down her spine. Emma had learned to anticipate the worst long before he even stepped inside. His arrival meant a new round of verbal insults and angry demands, and sometimes worse. The fear had become a daily part of her life. Every day, Emma tried to make herself invisible, avoiding his rage. She would quickly hide her schoolwork and tidy up the house in an attempt to appease him. She knew that no matter how hard she tried, Dale would always find something to criticize. Her mother, Sarah, was often absent, working double shifts at the county hospital. Emma spent long hours alone with Dale, and he grew more violent with each passing day. Emma didn't remember when it all started. All she knew was that her life had changed since her mother married Dale. What had once been a peaceful home had now turned into a place of constant fear. She often found herself wishing for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. The once comforting surroundings of the farmhouse now felt like a prison, and her only solace came when she could escape to the far edge of their property, where an unexpected companion awaited. One day, during a particularly bad encounter, Emma fled to the old fence line that separated their land from the abandoned Hartwell Ranch. It was there that she first saw the bull. He was massive, with sleek black fur that shimmered under the sun, and his dark eyes seemed to follow Emma with an intelligence that both frightened and comforted her. For the first time in months, Emma felt like someone, or something, cared about her. She whispered, "I wish you could help me." The bull approached, its large head pressing against the fence. It was the start of something Emma could never have imagined. Over the next few weeks, Emma found herself visiting the mysterious bull every day after school. It became her secret escape, a moment of peace before returning to the torment of her home. She would sit by the fence talking to him about everything, her fears, her loneliness, and the pain Dale inflicted on her. The bull, whom Emma had named Guardian, always stood quietly, his intelligent eyes focused on her every word. Guardian never responded with anything more than soft rumbling sounds, but Emma felt as if he understood her completely. She would cry, and Guardian would lower his head, standing still as if offering silent comfort. Every day she came back, she found herself healing just a little bit more, as if the bull's presence was somehow protecting her from the world she had to face. She began to talk to him about her mother's indifference, about how Sarah never seemed to believe her when she tried to explain the bruises and the fear that consumed her life. Guardian's presence gave Emma the courage to voice the truths she could never say aloud to anyone else. But as much as the bull comforted her, there was always that feeling of dread in her heart. She knew that Dale's anger was growing, and she feared the day when it would be directed at her once again. Yet somehow, every time she left Guardian and returned home, she felt a strange sense of calm, as though she wasn't truly alone. But that peace would soon be shattered. The days began to blur together as Emma's life with Dale grew more unbearable. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she could hear the familiar sound of his truck rumbling down the gravel driveway. Her heart would race as she quickly moved to hide in the shadows of the house, hoping that somehow tonight would be different, that he wouldn't be as angry. But it never was. Dale's rages were becoming more violent, and Emma could feel herself slowly retreating into a shell of fear. He would shout, slam doors, and sometimes break things, his violent outbursts unpredictable and terrifying. Emma learned to anticipate his moods, but nothing could prepare her for what was coming. One night, after an especially cruel confrontation where Dale had thrown a coffee mug at her, Emma fled to the fence line once again. The pain of the day, both physical and emotional, felt unbearable. She needed the calm of Guardian, needed to be reminded that there was something good in the world, something that cared for her. But when she reached the fence, something felt different. Guardian was pacing restlessly, his hooves striking the ground with unusual force. His dark eyes were fixed on the house, and Emma felt a shiver of unease. For the first time, she felt as though the bull was no longer just her protector. Something more was at work. As she approached, Guardian stopped pacing and looked directly at her. His gaze seemed more intense, almost as though he was trying to communicate something urgent. Emma paused, confusion and worry swirling inside her. Was there something he knew? Something she didn't understand? Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled slightly, and she could hear the faint rumble of an engine in the distance. It was Dale. And this time, Emma wasn't sure she would make it back inside safely. That night, everything changed. Emma's heart pounded as she turned to head back toward the house, but before she could take more than a few steps, the unmistakable sound of Dale's truck grew louder. His truck had always been a source of dread, but tonight, something about it felt different. The rumble of the engine felt like the beginning of a storm, and Emma's legs grew weak beneath her. She needed to get inside before he saw her. But as she moved toward the house, she felt something that sent a cold shiver down her spine. Guardian the bull was no longer standing near the fence. He was walking toward her, his massive hooves making deep impressions in the earth as he moved with a sense of purpose. His eyes were fixed on the farmhouse, his stance protective and fierce. Emma's mind raced. What was happening? Why was Guardian acting like this? Suddenly, the door to the house flew open with a force that echoed in the quiet night. Dale's voice rang out, slurred and angry as he stumbled toward her. "You're still out here? I'll teach you to keep your mouth shut tonight." Emma froze, her body numb with fear. But as she turned to face Dale, she saw something that she couldn't quite comprehend. Guardian had stopped just a few feet away from her, his eyes now glowing with an intense, fiery light. The bull was between her and Dale, a living barrier that Emma had never seen before. Dale's drunken laughter died in his throat as he stopped, staring at the massive animal. "What in God's name?" he muttered, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and confusion. The bull let out a low, rumbling sound, and in that instant, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of protection. Guardian was not just standing there to guard her. He was sending a message. The air seemed to thicken with tension as Guardian's presence shifted from comforting to something much more powerful, something that felt almost otherworldly. Dale's anger faltered, his bravado slipping. "Get back inside, Emma," he mumbled, eyes wide as he looked from the bull to his stepdaughter. But Emma couldn't move. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not with Guardian standing there. But something in the air was about to snap. The air was thick with tension, as if the very ground beneath Emma's feet was holding its breath. Dale took a shaky step forward, his eyes locked on the bull, trying to appear braver than he felt. "You think you scare me, huh?" His voice wavered, the anger in it still strong, though uncertainty crept in. Guardian stood his ground, silent but undeniably menacing. His massive frame seemed to grow larger in the dim light, his dark eyes burning with an intensity Emma had never seen before. There was something about his presence now, something that filled the space with a primal energy. Dale's hand shook as he reached for the shotgun leaning against the side of the house. His fingers closed around the cold metal, but it wasn't just the weapon that he was clutching, it was his last thread of control. "I'll show you who's boss," Dale spat, though his voice lacked conviction. Guardian didn't move, but Emma could see the muscles in his body tense, ready. The bull's gaze never wavered, staying fixed on Dale. The atmosphere crackled with something ancient, something unspoken. Emma's heart raced, but she stood still, her eyes wide, not in fear but in awe. "You won't hurt her again," Emma heard a voice, not with her ears but in her mind. It was clear, firm and almost otherworldly. The words weren't spoken aloud, but the message was unmistakable. Dale froze, his fingers tightening on the shotgun. "What?" he stammered, glancing around as if searching for the source of the voice that had echoed in his head. What was that? His confidence was crumbling and Emma could see it in his eyes. He was starting to realize that he wasn't facing just a bull. Guardian took a step forward, his hooves striking the earth with a force that shook the ground beneath them. Dale's knees buckled, and for the first time since Emma had known him, he was genuinely afraid. "This isn't happening," Dale muttered, stepping back slowly, his eyes darting between the bull and Emma. Guardian's next move was swift and powerful. Without hesitation, he lowered his head and with one mighty thrust, he flipped the truck over onto its side, the sound of crushing metal and shattering glass ringing through the night. The impact was deafening and Emma stood frozen in place, her heart pounding in her chest. Dale's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at his now ruined truck. "What the hell?" Dale whispered, his voice shaking. He was no longer angry. He was terrified. The bull had shown him a force he couldn't comprehend, a power that wasn't his to control. Guardian didn't stop there. He took another deliberate step toward Dale, his eyes locked onto him as if issuing a challenge. Emma could see the fear in Dale's face, and for the first time she realized that this was no ordinary bull. Guardian had been protecting her all along, but now he was ready to make sure that no harm would come to her ever again. Dale stumbled backward, his legs shaking as he gripped the shotgun tighter. The once intimidating weapon now felt like nothing more than a piece of metal in his trembling hands. The bull's steps were slow but deliberate, each one echoing in the stillness of the night like a drumbeat. The air was thick with anticipation, as if something monumental was about to unfold. Emma watched, her breath held in her chest as Guardian moved closer to Dale. She could feel the gravity of the moment, the way everything around her seemed to fade, leaving only her, the bull, and Dale standing at a crossroads. Guardian had no need to charge or attack. His presence alone was enough to send a clear message to Dale. Dale's eyes flickered to the shotgun, but there was no longer any confidence in his stance. He had been a bully all his life, relying on fear to control others, but now fear had found him. Guardian's silent strength was a force that no weapon could challenge. "You'll regret this," Dale's voice quivered, but it was barely more than a whisper. His bravado was completely gone. He took another step back, but Guardian was right there, a looming figure of power and protection. The bull stopped just a few feet away, his eyes glowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce through Dale's soul. It was as if Guardian was seeing every dark moment of Dale's life, every cruel act he had ever committed, and now, those acts were catching up to him. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Then, without a sound, Guardian lowered his head and raised it again in a powerful, deliberate gesture. Dale's shotgun fell from his hands, clattering to the ground as he staggered back, his knees giving out beneath him. The weight of the bull's gaze was overwhelming, and for the first time, Dale understood that he was no longer in control. The universe had decided it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. "Leave," Guardian's presence seemed to command, though no words were spoken. It was more than just a threat, it was an undeniable command. The power in that silent exchange was enough to break Dale's resolve completely. He turned, his face pale, and fled into the night without a word, disappearing into the darkness. Emma stood frozen, her eyes locked on Guardian. In that moment, everything she had feared, everything she had endured, seemed to melt away. Dale was gone, and she was finally free. The house was silent now, except for the faint creaking of the wind against the old wooden walls. Emma stood at the window, watching as Dale's figure disappeared into the night. The sound of his truck, once a harbinger of dread, was now nothing more than a distant memory. Her heart pounded in her chest, but this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was relief. She turned to the side, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she saw her mother, Sarah, standing in the doorway. Emma had no idea how much time had passed, but it felt like a lifetime. Her mother's face was a mixture of confusion, concern, and something else, recognition. She had heard the commotion, and now she could see the wreckage of their past. "Mom?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but Sarah's expression softened, and she walked over to her daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace. Emma could feel the warmth of her mother's arms around her, a comfort that she had longed for. She wasn't alone anymore. But there were still so many things unsaid, so many things Emma had kept buried for so long. "I'm sorry, Emma. I never knew," Sarah murmured, her voice full of regret. "I never knew what you were going through." Emma nodded, her tears mixing with the lingering tension in the air. She didn't need her mother to say anything more. She had always known her mother loved her, but now, in this moment, Emma felt the weight of that love in a way she never had before. The past was gone, and the future, uncertain as it was, felt full of possibility. Outside, Guardian stood silently by the broken fence line, his massive frame silhouetted against the fading light. He had done what no one else could. He had saved Emma, and in doing so, he had shown her what it meant to be protected, to be valued. Emma wiped her eyes and turned back to her mother. "Mom," she said, her voice steady now, "I'm going to be okay. I don't need to be scared anymore." Her mother's eyes filled with tears and she nodded. "We'll be okay, Emma. We'll make sure of it." The next morning the world seemed different. The air felt clearer, lighter. Emma woke to the sound of birds singing outside her window, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, the familiar routine of the day didn't feel suffocating. She wasn't tiptoeing around Dale's wrath anymore. The fear that had once been her constant companion had evaporated overnight, replaced by a sense of freedom she hadn't dared to hope for. Sarah too seemed different. She was no longer the distant, exhausted woman who came home late at night. The realization of what had happened, the truth Emma had kept hidden for so long, had shaken Sarah to her core. But now, as she prepared breakfast, her movements were more deliberate, her voice softer. She had promised Emma things would change, and Sarah intended to keep that promise. As Emma sat at the kitchen table, she found herself looking out the window at the place where Guardian had stood the night before. He was gone now, disappeared as mysteriously as he had appeared. Emma wondered if she had imagined him, but deep down she knew she hadn't. He had been real. He had protected her in a way that no one else could, and his presence had filled her with something far more powerful than fear, hope. Later that day, Emma walked out to the broken fence line, her feet crunching the earth beneath her. She knew she had to say goodbye even though it felt impossible. She owed Guardian more than she could ever express. He had shown her what it meant to have someone, something, on her side, someone who believed in her when no one else did. "Thank you," Emma whispered into the wind. "For everything." In the distance she thought she saw a shadow, but when she blinked it was gone. Emma smiled softly. She didn't need to see Guardian to know that he was still out there, somewhere, watching over her. Her mother joined her outside, standing beside her daughter as they both gazed at the empty pasture. There was no need for words. Both of them understood that the bull, Guardian, had done his part. Now it was up to them to rebuild, to move forward. "We'll make this our new beginning," Sarah said quietly. "Together." Emma nodded. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel terrifying. It felt like the first step toward healing, toward a future filled with possibilities. And in the quiet of that moment, Emma made a promise to herself. She would never let fear control her again. She would stand tall just like Guardian had. And she would help others find their strength, just as he had helped her find hers. Weeks passed, and Emma found herself adjusting to a life she had never imagined possible. The house, once filled with tension, now felt like a place of peace. Sarah had taken a new job that allowed her to be home more often, and the days felt longer but brighter. Emma had started school again, and while the memories of the past still lingered, they no longer held the same weight. The changes were small, but they were enough. Emma began to laugh again, to talk to her friends, and to dream about the future. She had the freedom to be a child again, a luxury she had forgotten was even possible. But as much as things had changed, one thing stayed the same. Emma couldn't forget about Guardian. Every afternoon after school, she would find herself standing by the fence, staring out toward the pasture where he had once stood. Even though he was no longer there, his presence lingered in Emma's heart, a constant reminder of the strength she had found in herself through him. She never stopped thinking about how he had come into her life at the exact moment she had needed him, and how, even in his absence, his legacy had shaped the person she was becoming. It wasn't long before Emma started telling her story to others, about the bull who had saved her life. She talked to her teachers, to her classmates, and even to a few local news reporters who had caught wind of the strange events that had unfolded in their small town. The story of Guardian and the difference he had made in Emma's life became a symbol of hope for others. Soon the local community took notice. People from neighboring towns began visiting the land near the abandoned Hartwell Ranch, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary bull who had protected Emma. Though Guardian never appeared again, his legend continued to grow, sparking conversations about the powerful bond between humans and animals and the incredible capacity for protection and love. Emma felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, knowing that Guardian's influence was still making a difference in the lives of others. But it wasn't just about the bull anymore. Emma realized that she too had a role to play. She had survived, and now it was her turn to help others. She decided to start a program, a small foundation that would provide a safe space for children who had been through what she had experienced. She called it Guardian's Legacy, in honor of the bull who had given her a second chance at life. The program would offer counseling, support, and the opportunity for children to find their strength again, just as Emma had done. Guardian's Legacy began with simple steps, but those small actions soon turned into something much bigger than Emma had ever imagined. With Sarah's support, Emma started by visiting local schools, sharing her story, and talking to children who had faced similar challenges. Her message was clear. No matter how dark the days might seem, there was always hope. Emma's courage inspired many. Children who had been silenced by fear began to speak out. Parents who had long struggled with how to help their children started to reach out, hoping to make a difference. Emma found herself giving speeches, meeting with community leaders, and slowly building a network of people who shared her vision of a safer world for children. The first few months were difficult, filled with long hours of planning, fundraising, and finding the right people to help. But Emma never gave up. She often found herself back at the old fence line, remembering the strength she had gained from Guardian. The bull's legacy wasn't just about what he had done for her, it was about what he had sparked in her, a fire to help others, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Soon, donations started pouring in, and people from all walks of life offered their time, expertise, and resources to support the cause. The community rallied behind Emma and her mission, making the impossible seem possible. They transformed the abandoned Hartwell Ranch into a safe haven for children in crisis, a place where they could heal and find the strength to move forward. Guardian may have disappeared, but his presence was everywhere. The ranch became a symbol of protection, strength, and hope. Emma's face became known across the state, not as the victim of abuse, but as a young advocate for children's rights. But more than anything, Emma began to realize that her journey wasn't just about creating a program. It was about changing the way the world saw children, especially those who had suffered in silence. Guardian had given her a voice, and now she was giving that voice to others. As the months passed, Emma's work with Guardian's Legacy began to touch more lives than she had ever imagined. What had started as a small, local effort quickly gained national attention. News outlets ran stories about the young girl who had survived unimaginable abuse and turned her pain into a force for good. Emma's story spread far beyond Montana, inspiring others to step forward and start similar initiatives in their own communities. Each visit to a school, each speech she gave, brought more and more children who had faced similar trauma. The numbers grew, and with them, the need for more resources and support. Guardian's Legacy began to partner with other child advocacy groups, mental health organizations, and local shelters to provide comprehensive care for children who had experienced abuse, neglect, or abandonment. Emma spent countless hours working with counselors, therapists, and social workers to ensure that the children who came to the ranch received not only emotional support but also practical tools for overcoming their past. They learned how to trust again, how to believe in their own worth, and how to find safety in a world that had once been terrifying. Emma's personal journey became the foundation of the program, and her story of resilience was woven into every therapy session, every class, and every conversation. But it wasn't all easy. There were times when the weight of the work felt overwhelming. There were days when Emma felt like giving up, when the stories of the children she met cut too deep. But every time she faced a moment of doubt, she would think of Guardian, his strength, his unwavering protection, and she would find the courage to keep going. One of the most rewarding moments came when Emma met Marcus again. Marcus had been the first child to speak after meeting Guardian, and now, as a young boy, he had become a symbol of hope for the other children at the ranch. He was helping to guide the new arrivals, showing them that healing was possible. He had even started a program of his own to help other kids who had trouble speaking or trusting. Emma watched as Marcus and the other children grew stronger every day, and in their faces she saw the same strength that Guardian had instilled in her. They were learning to protect each other just as she had learned to protect herself. The community had come together, and the impact was undeniable. Years had passed since that fateful night when Guardian had appeared and changed Emma's life forever. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The once timid, frightened girl who had spent her days hiding from fear was now a confident young woman, an advocate for children's rights, and the founder of a thriving program that had saved countless lives. Guardian's Legacy had grown into a nationwide movement, a beacon of hope for children who had been silenced by trauma. Emma stood on the stage at the annual Guardian's Legacy Gala, looking out at the sea of faces that were filled with hope, gratitude, and determination. She had never imagined that her story would inspire so many people. But here they were, supporters, donors, survivors, all united under one mission, to protect children and give them the chance to heal. But even as the organization grew, Emma never lost sight of the one thing that had started it all: Guardian. His memory was everywhere: the ranch, the children's stories, the healing that had taken place. Though the bull had never returned, his spirit lived on in the lives he had touched. Emma had built something that was bigger than herself, something that would outlast her. And then, on a quiet evening at the ranch, Emma found herself back at the fence line. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the land. She closed her eyes and whispered softly into the wind, "Thank you, Guardian. You saved me, and now I'm saving others." For a moment, the breeze picked up, and Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. It was as if the universe itself was telling her that everything had come full circle. The fear, the pain, the darkness, it had all been part of her journey. But now Emma knew her purpose. She was here to protect, to heal, and to make sure no child ever had to endure what she had. And somewhere, far off in the distance, Emma felt the presence of Guardian once more. His legacy wasn't just about the bull, it was about the strength, courage, and compassion he had ignited in her heart. "Every child deserves protection," Emma whispered, her voice filled with conviction. "Every child deserves to feel safe." As the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Emma smiled. Her story had come full circle, and the world had been changed because of it.